Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3.
Everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Grant Subcommittee meeting of June 13th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And a reminder that all electronic devices to be switched to a non-audible function during committee and subcommittee meetings. And please note that quorum, as of this moment, is 3 out of 6. So we're good to go. We're good to roll. And just so committee members and those who are joining us as guests today are aware, there is a planning committee that is still underway. We've recessed planning committee for 45 minutes in a very optimistic vibe, hoping we can get the entire grants committee agenda dealt with in those 45 minutes. However, if we don't, we're okay to proceed with the 3 members. So you might see other grant committee members join us in the duration of this agenda while planning committee is recessed. So just to be very, very clear to the general public and those in the room with us today. So moving forward, approval of the agenda. Elsie, are there any changes to today's agenda, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, there are added communication items for today's meeting. Item 4.1, correspondence from Matt Afnick, President and Chief Operating Officer, Hamilton Sports Group, respecting HSG support for the annual Hamilton Santa Claus Parade, with a recommendation to be received and referred to consideration of item 10.1. There are added delegation requests for today's meeting, all respecting item 9.1 from the following individuals: Chelsea Kirkby, YWCA Hamilton; Kojo Damptey, McMaster University; and Jessica Benilla Damptey, Sexual Assault Center, Hamilton area.
Thank you. May I please get a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Matt Francis, seconded by Councillor Tom Jackson, and please register your vote. And I believe Councillor Taddison is voting in the affirmative for our agenda this afternoon. Thank you. Next up is declarations of interest. Any to declare at this time, committee members? Seeing none, we'll proceed to approval of the minutes of our previous meeting on May 16th, 2023. May I please get a mover and seconder to approve the minutes? Moved by Councillor Francis, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Jackson, thank you both. Please indicate your vote now.
And that carries 1-0.
Thank you. And on to communication items. First up is 4.1, correspondence from Matt Afnick, President and Chief Operating Officer of Hamilton Sports Group, respecting HSG support for the annual Hamilton Santa Claus Parade. The recommendation is for it to be received and referred in consideration of item 10.1. May I please get a mover and seconder on this communication item? Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Taddison. Thank you both. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll move to voting to receive it. Oh, okay, on the speakers list. Yes, Councillor Jackson.
My apologies, Chair Nan. I didn't want to speak to the reference from the Grey Cup Tiger Cat correspondence, but I just want to make committee and yourself aware. I believe one of the delegates from the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade may reference it in their advocacy for the funding.
Fair
I just
enough.
want to put you on notice. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on to next agenda item, which is delegations. First up for delegations is item 5.1, which is Doug Hobson from the Hamilton Santa Claus Day.
Sorry, we just have to approve the delegation request first.
Oh, thank you. I mean, you're still 5.1. That remains to be true, along with a number of other delegates. So as listed by our clerk in the agenda review, or sorry, in the agenda approval amendments. Please get a mover and seconder to approve the delegations before we hear them. That's you guys, yeah. Councillor Jackson, thank you, Councillor Tadison. And we can vote to approve the delegations, and then we'll move to Doug. Thank you. Okay, Doug, it is your turn to join us, Mr. Hobson, from the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade Committee respecting item 10.1, and you have 5 minutes. You don't have a chair, however. Would you like to roll one over?
No, I think I'm fine.
You prefer to stand?
Yeah, I'm okay to stand.
All right.
Gets the nerves out.
If you need to, just grab a chair.
Will do.
All right, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Nan and fellow Grants Committee subcommittee members, and we thank you for allowing us to speak to you today. I stand here before you to express our concerns about the future of the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade. We ask the councillors to support Councillor Jackson's motion regarding the funding for the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade, along with the other Santa Claus parades, whose funding is also being questioned and or reduced. Without these much-needed funds, the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade cannot continue, and a wonderful family tradition in Hamilton could be lost. This current situation will also affect the Grey Cup Festival, as we just heard, as we have recently come to an agreement with the Grey Cup Festival and Events team to have the Grey Cup Parade amalgamated with our parade. These recent developments with the City of Hamilton funding have put this partnership in jeopardy, and I believe a letter from the events team, which was just mentioned, has already been sent in for your review. Why do we put on the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade? We do this for the kids and family alike in the City of Hamilton. Some of these kids may not have a whole lot to smile about come Christmas time or in through this festive season, but at least for a couple of hours on a day in November, they get to see something that excites them and puts a smile on their face. Santa Claus touches the heart of many children of many, touches the heart of many children of many cultures and religious backgrounds. We practice spreading the holiday spirit of loving, caring, and giving. We welcome all groups and associations to participate with us in sharing this goodwill and in celebration during our parade. We have no restrictions on who can enter the parade or who can volunteer for the parade. Attending the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade is something that many Hamiltonians remember well into adulthood. It would certainly be sad to see something that has been such a great tradition for so many years in Hamilton be lost. Some may have perceptions that a parade cannot change and grow to include our many varied communities within Hamilton. We disagree, as we are always striving to make this an event for everyone, and would look forward to working with the City of Hamilton to do that for all the kids and kids at heart in our neighborhoods and beyond. Points about the parade that we'd like to share with you are, our committee does more in our community rather than just put on a Santa Claus parade. We arrange various charitable events with facilities such as women's shelters, nursing homes, Special Olympics, as well as the Ron Joyce Center for Autism. This is done in an effort to give back to the community that supports us. To not be able to do this anymore would certainly be a loss to those organizations who have benefited. With the Grey Cup Festival happening downtown as well, the parade will bring a large, diverse crowd to the downtown area, which would have a positive impact. This could result in higher than normal sales for vendors along and within the surrounding areas of the parade route and the festival area. The Hamilton Santa Claus Parade also partners with various groups to form a collection of non-perishable foods for the much-needed local programs. All of these non-perishable foods are used to assist in programs located within Hamilton. We strive to reinforce shared positive values within the city by providing a warm, welcome, and spirited event. Hamilton is a diverse community, and our event is attended by all ages and all walks of life. There are many holidays celebrated during winter by those in our communities. Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, and winter solstice are just some of the different celebrations that take place during the winter. Entries for the parade include a variety of local groups and associations. We recognize that our ask is high, and moving forward, we'll be looking at cost-effective options for our parade, such as parade routes, which carries different costs depending on the location and route planned. We have also made arrangements with our policy analyst for grants, Andrea, to review our budget applications so that we can improve our applications in the future to better meet the requirements of the grants committee. Like other cities and towns, we would like to work with the City of Hamilton in partnership to present the best for our community. Unfortunately, without funding, the ability to host a Santa Claus parade could be lost. Thank you very much for your time, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hobson. Committee members, the eScribe microphone icon may not be working, so if you're wanting to be on the speakers list, please indicate so the clerks can add you. So Councillor Jackson, any of my other colleagues on the committee, just indicate. Got that? As well as our guests in the room, which is Councillor McMeekin and Councillor Beattie. Thank you both. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair Nan. I just want to thank Chair Doug Hobson, his entire committee made up of entirely volunteers for what they're doing to maintain, I believe it's a good 50-year tradition in our city. I remember the original organizer and field marshal of the parade, Ed Cummings, led the parade with his volunteers for many, many years, Chair Nan. And so I just want to first of all recognize and thank you, Chair Doug Hobson, for coming in today, explaining the situation. I really appreciate if things may and hopefully go favorably today in at council, that you're willing to even work more closely with city staff to see what you can do to strengthen your application. And lastly, Chair Nan, a question for you to Doug. Doug, you have policing and street barricade costs, traffic costs. I'm not asking for amounts or anything, but those costs fall upon your overall budget. Through you, Chair Nan, please.
Yes, that is correct.
So maybe at some point in time, Chair Nan, that might be a pocket of money that we may want to, as a committee, someday review in terms of if police costs, street barricade costs are possibly an impediment or somewhat of a hardship that might help the organizations like Santa Claus Parades in the future. That might be a double benefit, both in terms of maybe helping them in the future reduce their ask, if some portion of that expense to hire extra policing, to hire and put barricades up and fencing for the parades may be covered within a department or some other pocket of money. I'm only throwing that out there as a thought down the road. Thank you, Chair Nan. Thanks again, Doug.
Thank you.
you.
And any other committee members? Seeing no one else on the speakers list, if Councillor Jackson, you don't mind just holding the microphone, enabling me to ask some questions.
Please, Councillor.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Hobson, just a few quick clarifying questions. How long has your organization been receiving the enrichment funds?
I believe the original we took over 54 years ago is when our association took it over from the Mountain Men's Group? Yeah. Mountain Men's Business Group were the predecessors to our group.
Okay, so you've had carriage of it for 54 years?
Yes.
And how many years have you received community enrichment funds?
I believe for pretty much all of those years.
For each of the years. And if I could, through you, I'm appreciating that in your delegation today that you indicated that you're prepared to work diligently, thoroughly, responsively with our staff in terms of improving your application process moving forward. And I want you to know that, it's important that as a municipality, we're supporting community capacity building. And part of the changes that we're seeing in this grant program overall is to speak to that capacity in our community and making sure that it's more equitably available in terms of a group of funds to our residents and organizations that historically have been systemically left out of accessing these funds, but more importantly, ensuring that organizations like yours that have been around for 50 years also are fulfilling the requirements of a grant application. So do you think you'll have through you, Chair, any grant writing elves joining your team?
Possibly, I'm not sure how to answer that. I know I've been in talk with Andrea, and we've already discussed our applications. And I think the subcommittee will acknowledge that our applications have gotten better from our predecessors, my predecessors, and I'm striving to work towards that. I've actually revamped a lot of our committee's ways of doing things, from pen and paper to fully automated now.
Yeah.
So this is a natural progression that I can see.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I do appreciate that, right? That as volunteers, moving from doing things the way that you're used to doing things to evolving to also making sure that you're supported in that process is important to us as a municipality. But yeah, fundamentally, at the end of the day, we're all required to kind of up our games organizationally. And so I really appreciate that in your delegation, you're highlighting that piece that enables us to make sure that you're being adjudicated as equitably as every other application. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, Chair, back to you, Councillor Nan.
Thank you. So no further questions. You can be seated. If I could get a mover and seconder to approve this or receive this delegation, moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Taddison. And if committee could vote to receive. Thank you. On to 6.2, which is Craig Zuck also from the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade Committee, respecting the same item. Come on up, Craig. You have 5 minutes also. If you'd like to grab a chair, you're more than welcome to. Just turn on your microphone. Okay. Thank you. Yep.
Madam Chair, we understand that this has been submitted previously, but I would like to use my time to read the letter sent by the President and CEO of the Hamilton Sports Group in support of the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade Committee hosting the 2023 Grey Cup Parade to make it public record. As written, Madam Mayor and members of Hamilton City Council, I am writing on behalf of Hamilton Sports Group to express our support to the annual Hamilton Santa Claus Parade. The Hamilton Santa Claus Parade is an institution in Hamilton, providing our community a unique opportunity to come together in celebration of the holiday season. Its impact, economically and culturally, to the city and surrounding area is significant. Showcasing the best of Hamilton's community is a key cornerstone of our 2023 Grey Cup Festival. As a result, we partnered with the organizers of the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade Committee long ago to shift the parade to Grey Cup weekend and make it a key component of our festival programming. The significant detail has yet to be announced publicly, but in light of the recent announcement, we felt the need to step forward and support our partners at the Hamilton Santa Claus Parade Committee. This strategic partnership is a primary example of our larger strategy for the festival to engage and include many local and community partners and have them participate actively by delivering quality programming during festival week, in this case, Saturday morning. We are proud to be welcoming the Greater Hamilton area and guests from across Canada and around the world to Hamilton to partake in the festival and the 110th Grey Cup and experience the best of Hamilton. The festival, including the parade, will have a profound positive impact on our community culturally and economically. We thank you in advance for your consideration. Sincerely, Matt Afanek, President and Chief Operating Officer, Business Operations, Hamilton Sports Group. Madam Chair, not only do I read this letter as a second generation member, but also with the privilege of being the Hamilton Santa Claus for the past 14 years. I thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, committee members? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Craig, thanks, Chair Nan. Thank you, Craig, and thank you. You would look really fine in that Santa Claus outfit. I could see. That's a supreme compliment, Craig. That's a supreme compliment. Craig, I think there may have been just a bit of a disconnect, Chair Nan. To your knowledge, was that Grey Cup Festival organizer affiliated with the Tiger Cats and the Grey Cup Committee? Are you aware of if that correspondence made its way to city staff and the City Enrichment Fund? Because something tells me there may have been a disconnect that would have, if you will, strengthened your application, knowing Chair Nan that there was, if you will, a merging of the two parades to make it one gigantic, wonderful parade for both events in our community at the same time. So Craig, are you aware by any chance if that correspondence prior to now was communicated to city staff through you, Chair Nan, please?
I don't think it has been, based on the fact that the Grey Cup Committee has kind of joined our forces, but yet couldn't come up with a time when they can release this.
I see.
So we're kind of, come on fellas, let's get on board here. And so it is in the process of getting pushed forward now.
Thank you, Craig. Chair Nan, I only asked that. I'm not asking for any response from staff. It may, underline may, if not known, may have strengthened the application and the overall grading with these two great events merging together as one. Thank you, Chair Nan. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. No
welcome.
further questions? Thank you for your time. And
Thank you.
Thank you for delegating and reading that out onto the record. We're moving forward. Nope. Yes, we will get a approval to receive the delegation, moved by Councillor Taddison, second by Councillor Crutch. All those in favor of receiving this delegation, please indicate. Thank you. On to 6.3, Stephanie Wilsack, also from the Santa Claus Day Parade. Sorry, I keep saying day in there, Santa Claus Parade, respecting item 10.1, who's joining us virtually. Stephanie? Perhaps joining us virtually? Is Stephanie in the meeting virtually? She's not.
But she was supposed to attend virtually.
Okay. Well, I will call on Stephanie when we get to the end of the delegation list. Perhaps she's having some connectivity issues. Stephanie, if you're somehow hearing my voice right now, you have about 15, 20 minutes to get online in order to be heard today. So we'll move forward to 6.4, which is Kim Martin from the Social Planning and Research Council of Hamilton, respecting item 9.1, the 2023 City Enrichment Fund allocation process. Kim, you have 5 minutes. If you want to grab a chair, you're more than welcome to.
Okay.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Martin. I'm the Executive Director with the Social Planning and Research Council of Hamilton. Our organization submitted 2 applications to the Community Enrichment Fund to help support an existing program as well as a new program addressing an emergent need. We received funding for 75% of our ask in both cases, and we have submitted an appeal for one of our programs. However, I'm here today not to speak to our specific appeal, as I trust that there is a process in place to address that, but I'm here today to speak to what I see as inconsistencies in this year's granting process, and also to offer some suggestions moving forward. Working in the nonprofit sector and in partnership with a number of community organizations, SPRC has been a strong supporter of equity-based approaches to funding. This in part means making space for organizations and community groups serving high priority and equity-deserving populations in Hamilton, and providing granting opportunities for new groups and programs. The city has attempted to embrace a more equitable approach by creating a new and emergent needs category, so that was very welcome, which is designed to increase accessibility for new and innovative programs. This was particularly timely given the growth of new programs as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. When applicants submitted applications to the CEF in the fall of 2022, each did so knowing there were no guarantees for funding. However, applicants also believed and had the experience to know that the criteria for funding and how funds would be allocated was similar to prior years. In other words, applications receiving the highest scores, which was an A, were likely to receive full funding, possibly with some consideration of the previous year's award. There was nothing noted in the application process or the documents, nothing noted in the workshops that were offered by the city to assist community organizations in their preparation that would indicate that there would be a cut across the board as part of a new funding rationale. And this is where the granting process has fallen short this year. Somewhere between the application submission in the fall of 2022 and the staff recommendations in May of 2023, the recommended funding rationale under which applicants applied for funds changed. And while in principle I have no issue with the city shifting the focus of their funding, that needs to happen over time. We need to create new models. I believe this should have been clear to the applicants at the time of the application, and it should have been done also in consultation and with community input. Had the new rationale been known at the time of application, this would have allowed organizations and community groups to adjust their applications accordingly or attempt to seek alternate funding sources. One of the reasons I wanted to speak to the committee today is out of concern for the nonprofit sector, which is represented heavily in the community service sector of the CEF. This is the same sector that serves high-needs community members, such as youth, seniors, equity-deserving groups, including those experiencing gender-based violence, experiencing housing precarity, with addiction and other mental health issues, and those with unique needs also as newcomers to Hamilton. And as a result, many of these organizations may be unable to provide the same level of service and are unable to make up these revenue shortfalls. These organizations provide vital services in our city, as you already know, and are an integral part of our social safety net. The community services sector continues to experience the effects of reduced funding while trying to cope with the same and increasing challenges and inflation. They're struggling to recruit and to maintain adequate staffing at a time when frontline workers, supervisors, and management are simply burnt out, having gone through the most significant health and socioeconomic crisis of our lifetime. We are still experiencing the pandemic of impacts, and we will for some time. When the game rules change midstream, the result is a loss of trust in the system. And I have to wonder how this will impact the next funding cycle in September. In other words, if this is the model that's going to be used going forward, will organizations and community groups feel that they need to present higher budgets that will be able to sustain a 25% or more reduction in funding? This is not how our sector has operated. Organizations, particularly in the nonprofit sector, ask for what they need. And in many cases, they ask for less than what they need. But increased budgets very well could be an unintended consequence of this year's funding model, and particularly because this was done without any consultation or prior notice. I want to recognize that the intentions of city staff to provide grants to more programs this year, and I recognize the challenge that they're faced as requests outpace the increases to the City Enrichment Fund budget. Still, making across-the-board cuts to all programs may not be the most effective way to do this, as it restricts or eliminates service delivery, and it's also not the most equitable. In fact, the CEF applications gathered equity information concerning board and staff composition of organizations, of the clients and participants that they served, but the application clearly stated that this information did not form part of the adjudication process. My recommendations at this point to the granting committee are to direct city staff to, first of all, consult with the community to receive some input into developing an equitable funding model to be used by the Community Enrichment Fund, which is transparent, which is clear at the time of application, and the model should describe not only how the applications are scored and how funding will be allocated, but also how will funding be allocated in situations where the funding requests exceed the CEF budget. I would maintain, again, that a cut across the board may be equal, but it's not a demonstration of equity. Second recommendation would be to make a firm commitment moving forward to not change funding models midstream in an application process. All of that information needs to be available at the beginning of the process and not changed midway through. And I do have a recommendation also for council, which I know this is not, you're not in front of the entire council, but we do need also to increase the city enrichment funding and to prioritize this in the next budget. Recognizing that the city is unable to fulfill its mandate to support the residents of Hamilton without the services provided by the nonprofit sector and the community services category of this grant. These are the organizations and the groups that are working tirelessly to keep people safe, to keep people housed in incredibly challenging times, and they simply cannot do this without your financial support. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, the floor is open for questions or comments to the delegate. Councillor Crutch.
Thanks very much for your insightful comments. My only question to you is about predictability of funding. And so you spoke to issues of that funding being predictable and it being locked in. So we use kind of multi-year funding models right now so we can look at in the future how we're scaling up the funding. So there's some sense. But our budget is out of line in terms of its temporality with the actual process going on. So we're in the budget cycle while the grants analysis process is going on. As a former juror, I know it very well. So do you think moving those around would make this a lot more predictable? So knowing for sure, no matter what, this is exactly how much money is going to be coming into this fund before the application intake process happens is essential to getting this right.
I think that certainly could be one of the things that's explored. I think really the miss this year was that people went into this granting process with beliefs based on what had happened before and the information they had, and they simply didn't know even that if, for example, an organization scored an A, that they wouldn't receive all their funding. And so we really need to be clear in terms of how are we going to deal with these situations so that people know that on the front end. But certainly my concern is that the reward here for organizations is to say, okay, well, 25% was cut, so I better make sure that that 25% is my next in my next budget. And that's not the way that certainly the nonprofit sector operates, and yet it seems to be the game that we're kind of being asked to play if we are to secure funding to provide the needed services in the community. So, you know, wanting to get away from that is I think the transparency would help us to actually continue to put into our applications what we know that we need in order to provide the services for the community.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thanks, and to the chair, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that part of the issue is that these things are out of sync, and they've traditionally been out of sync for a very long time, and that predictability and transparency at the front end just doesn't exist. So I'll save my motions for AFNA, but yeah, I'll have one on this subject for sure. Thank you very much for your delegation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. If I could pass the chair to you, Councillor Jackson. Oh, right. Councillor Crutch, you are vice chair. Sorry, I got into a habit of
I'll be
defaulting to
leaving
Councillor
in
Jackson.
5 minutes, so I can do what I can until then.
You can be my
Yes.
vice chair for 5 minutes.
Councillor
Awesome.
Nan, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for pointing it out. I think we're all juggling a lot this afternoon, so I appreciate committee members fulfilling what you can while you're here. Through you, Vice Chair, thank you, Kim, for coming in to delegate, really appreciating the recommendations. In terms of the recommendation about consultation with grantee and or community members, can you just clarify who you think ought to be consulted as it relates to the equitable funding process and improvements?
Yes, I mean, I believe I think all organizations that are part of CEF should be consulted. I think that there are certainly ideas, I think, in community in terms of how we can do this equitably, and it's not to put one organization over another, but it's to look at how can we have a process that's equitable. We certainly have, I think, people within, I know we have people within our community that have expertise in terms of how to be developing those equitable frameworks, and also just in recognition of some of the barriers that do exist for organizations to be able to access funding. So I won't give you any names, but I'm
No,
sure-
no, no, I was looking for names, but I just wanted to clarify if you meant appellant organizations or if you meant community members in general or community stakeholders in general. Thank you. And again, thank you so much for coming to delegate. It is a year of transition. I've been saying this as chair of grant committee. One of the reasons I took on chair for grant committee this term was because I'm so excited about the transitions we're making with this program. And the wholehearted commitment towards a much more equitable process moving forward. And, I said it in our last grant committee meetings, I'll continue to say it, staff understand the assignment. Does that mean we're going to get it perfect out the gate? No, and I appreciate your feedback as considerations for us to improve the process moving forward. So thank you so much for your delegation.
Thank you.
I'll take back the chair, Councillor Crutch, thank you. If I could get a mover and seconder to receive the delegation, moved by Councillor Crutch, seconded by Councillor Taddison, and it's before committee for approval. Thank you. I do know that Stephanie Wilsack has joined us virtually. Stephanie, if you can turn on your camera and test your microphone by saying good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, we can hear you and see you. So you have 5 minutes.
apologize.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much for the time this afternoon. I apologize for the delay. It is a pleasure to be able to present the Flamborough Santa Claus Parade to you this afternoon. I don't have a formal presentation. I've been doing this parade for 9 years. I'm the Flamborough Santa Claus Parade Coordinator. I've lived in Waterdown for 30 years. I have taken part in all of the activities that surround the wonderful community of Waterdown in terms of the community involvement and took on this role from a really extraordinary legacy crew that did it prior to us for the 25 or 20 years before I joined it. I'll be brief. I know you've had a heck of a day, so I will get right to our point. We are a fully volunteer, donation-based community sponsorship, community partnership event. We are a 90-minute event on a cold winter's night in November celebrating Christmas. I appreciate, as does my executive committee, because we've had some great conversations about the CEF funding over the last 2 or 3 weeks. We sincerely appreciate the challenges that were put forward to all of you as you receive these exorbitant number of applications for the good work that everyone does in our community. I applaud the fact that were able to grant to all new applicants. We all did. We think that's the best way to build our future of our community. The one thing that is sort of different about the Flamborough Santa Claus Parade is that we are not asking for any revenue from the CEF for the event itself in terms of what goes on the streets or anything. We are looking for that revenue to keep our participants and our spectators safe. So as you well know, it costs a great deal of money to ensure that the roads are closed safely. We're a night parade, so we need areas to be illuminated with extra lighting. We have the police, obviously, with our road closures. We hire a professional group to close our roads, and those are just a few of the items we do. It comes out to well over $30,000 in our road closure safety parameters. So the $15,000 that we ask of you, which I realize is the max, and I will applaud Andrea Carvalho, who has worked very closely and tirelessly with me over the last X number of years to make my application seamless and smooth and sellable, because I fully comprehend that a 90-minute event in November asking for $15,000 where we are unable to track our participants, well, I guess we could track them, but track our spectators. We have main entry. We don't know how many kids we get. We don't know how much money we bring to the city. We do know by our parking lots and by our streets and by the feedback from people who say, holy cow, we can't believe how many people came to our little town, that we do get a lot of attention, but we can't evaluate that. I get it. But what we are asking of you this year in particular, knowing it very well could be a favor that the city is doing, and I appreciate Councilman Jackson for the help, is that without that $15,000, we are going to rely on our community and our people to fill that void. We received an $8,000 bill, $7,200 bill for insurance with about 2 weeks notice prior to the parade last year. Went to the community, asked for help, they stepped up and were able to allow us to get that insurance. The lack of $15,000 this year is not going to stop our parade. So I believe I checked that box off that said, you know, we're going to do the very best we can and have to make a D-Day decision in October. But I just would like to present the case to you and answer any questions you may have by just asking if you might reconsider that 15,000 goes right back to the city in terms of keeping our city's roads safe and our participants safe and our entries safe. And that's all I'm asking of. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Delegate Wilsack, for joining us and navigating yourself online virtually to be able to make that
Sorry
happen.
about that.
No worries. It's, yeah, it can be a challenge. Any questions or comments from committee members? First up is Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair Nan. Stephanie, nice to meet you virtually. Did you want to acknowledge, is it your Chair Wilf who's here in person with us? Did you just want to acknowledge him, please?
I would like to. I'm afraid I knew that he was in the room. I did receive a note from him, but I wasn't aware that he was around the table. Thank you. Yes, Wilf has been instrumental in ensuring that our parade has great sustenance and that we are able to meet the needs of our community. Wilf is a wonderful addition to our committee and has been with me since day one.
Terrific. And secondly, once again, I touched on it with Chair Doug Hobson with Hamilton Santa Claus Parade and possibly Chair Nan, something to consider for this committee going forward. But again, it sounds like that 15,000 is needed to help for street barricades, fencing, policing costs, external costs, things like that, that otherwise may jeopardize your parade. Am I clear on that through you, Chair Nan, to you, Stephanie?
Yes, that's correct. We don't actually do barricades. We may this year because of obviously the emergency response plan, but we don't actually do the barricades. But yes, it's the road closures, it's the safety, it's everything we can do to keep our participants and our spectators safe.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks, Chair Nan.
Thank you. No further speakers on the list. If I could get a mover and seconder to receive this delegation, moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Taddison. Thank you. And it's before committee for receipt. Thank you. We'll move on to 6.5, which is Chelsea Kirby from the YWCA Hamilton respecting item 9.1, 2023 City Enrichment Fund allocation process. Chelsea is virtual. Thank you.
Online. Thanks.
I see you. Thank you. You have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me. So my name's Chelsea Kirkby, and I'm the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives and Program Development at the YWCA Hamilton. So I'm delegating today to discuss two issues with the City Enrichment Fund process that have impacted the services that we're able to deliver. So the YWCA Hamilton put in 2 applications for the 2023 City Enrichment funding. One application was for our Violence Against Women residential program, for which we were granted 75% of the amount that we requested. And although this will impact programming to support women and gender diverse people who are fleeing violence, we didn't appeal this amount. But I am here today just to highlight that the new funding rationale, which we understand is intended to ensure, more equitable distribution of funds, which we fully support, should have been communicated at the time of application so that organizations like ourselves could have planned accordingly for any gaps in funding. As we were expecting, the full amount based on our score and based on how funding would be allocated or has been allocated in previous years. So having known how the process or rationale had changed, we could have made appropriate adjustments or proactively sought out funding elsewhere. And for the community sector, as everyone's aware, we're often piecing together funding year over year. And we've really seen an increase in need due to the impacts of the pandemic. So having this unexpected reduction in funding really impacts service delivery in terms of quality and the number of individuals that our programs can reach. So I just hope that the committee recognizes this impact and that prior to further changes to process, that community organizations are consulted so they can provide some feedback on how to equitably distribute funds. So I also wanted to flag another process or outcome issue with regards to the application that we have submitted an appeal. So the Elizabeth Fry Society of Southern Ontario region ceased operations on March 31st in 2023. And the YWCA has taken on some of their services, including their gender-based violence counseling and drop-in program. And this decision was made by the YWCA as the services really align with the mandate, with our mandate, and there was existing funding and active funding applications or requests to support the programming. So Elizabeth Fry submitted the original application to the City Enrichment Fund under the Emerging Needs and Program Innovation Stream to fund the Sex Trade Alternative Resources and Services Program. And this program provides a daily drop-in center for women who are involved in sex work and victims or survivors of human trafficking so that they can access a safe and inclusive space. So there's no details provided in the original City Enrichment Fund application summary or the 2023 appeal summary that was provided to the grant subcommittee as to why the Elizabeth Fry Society received a not applicable instead of a score and no recommended amount to be funded. Nor are there any details that the program had transferred over to the YWCA. So the YWCA, we did reach out to the city staff to determine how this application could remain active and be transferred to the YWCA, as the program had not changed at all, and the funding is still needed to run the program effectively. It's just under different leadership. So we didn't receive an adequate response as to how or whether we could transfer the application until after the funding recommendations were approved. And that response was that staff do not have the authority to transfer funds between organizations after an application has been submitted. So I'm delegating today just to provide these details, some more details and context to the application, and to request that the City Enrichment Fund guidelines allow for transfer of application or funding between organizations, especially in these extenuating circumstances when an organization ceases to operate and the program and funding request remains the same, it's just under different leadership. So with that context, I want to also flag that we appealed for the full amount requested in the original application, which is $12,500. And I wanted to share that some of the impacts should the funding not be approved. So with that contribution from the City Enrichment Fund, without that contribution, the program would have to cut about a quarter staff person, which would impact the number of individuals involved in sex work and victims or survivors of human trafficking that could be supported through drop-in programming, in-reach services for incarcerated women and non-binary individuals, as well as gender-based violence counseling. So we know there's a growing need for these services within the current YWCA programming, as well as needs identified by the community, including an increase of women that are involved in the justice system, as well as the closure of other community drop-in programming for sex workers. So we estimate that just over 80 women a year who could benefit from safe, inclusive, one-on-one counseling, group or drop-in support, and warm referrals to appropriate services will not be served without this funding. So I just wanted to end on that, just hoping that committee members will consider transferring the original application to the YWCA and approving the amount requested to ensure this vital program can continue. So thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to delegate. Good to see you again, Chelsea. Any questions, committee members? Seeing none, then I'll pass the chair over to Councillor Jackson. I did want to just clarify one thing with you, if I could, Delegate Kirby. So in terms of the organizational change and administrative leadership change for item 64 on our list of appeals, which is the STARS program, is that, just to get that crystal clear, that's the one? So no tie to item 65 through you, Chair, which is the Survivors of Hamilton Outreach Program?
No, just the STARS program, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify the one item.
Okay, back to you, Councillor.
Thank you. And seeing no other speakers on the list, we'll then have a mover and seconder to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Francis, seconded by Councillor Taddison. All those in favor, please indicate your vote now. Thank you. On to 6.6. Thank you again, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Next is Kojo Damti from McMaster University respecting 9.1 2023 City Enrichment Fund allocation process. Hi, Kojo. When you're ready, microphone on, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I start, let me say I'm not opposed to any Santa Claus parades in Hamilton. Just wanted to start with that. So I come to this discussion based on my experience. One, I've been a recipient of CEF. I've been an adjudicator. And I've also advocated for the increase of CEF. And I have done that with the Just Recovery Coalition for the last 2 years. And so when we get to a point like this where now all of a sudden there's money available to a number of organizations, it really brings to task the work that city staff did prior to today to talk about a need to increase the CEF. And former Councillor Brenda Johnson did work on that as well. So I think for me, today I'm here to say that this is evidence, full-on evidence of why the City Enrichment Fund needs to increase in terms of funding envelope, because there are so many community organizations that are doing great work that need the funding. The second piece is this funding also needs restructuring, because if we have one organization that has received funding for years and years and years, and we have new organizations that are doing equally critical work and are not having access to funds, then how are we moving our city forward? So it means that we need to rethink all the funding areas and how we apply them differently, because for the arts funding envelope, we might need different priorities versus the community services funding envelope versus the agricultural funding envelope. So I think we need to really rethink what this fund is used for and what the priorities are. The third issue is the grading system. I think it's very troubling that organizations that are graded A don't get their full funding, but then organizations that are graded C are getting full funding. And the question would be, what is the rationale for that? And also, we had lots of adjudicators doing the work. And so are we saying the work that the adjudicators did was all for naught? And if maybe the decision around funding is always going to be based on individual councillors, then maybe we don't need adjudicators. And I only say that to show you how important it is to get this funding envelope done in a way that's transparent and in a way that is responding to the needs of the community. So, long story short, I would say, yes, try and fund everybody, but be transparent about, who gets full funding and who gets 75% and who gets 25%. And also, the community organizations doing this work, they come in different sizes and shapes, right? Santa Claus Parade, thank you to all the delegates. It's a one-day event, but it still has implications for the city. And there are other organizations that are doing work 365 days in the year, and they are also doing work that impacts our city. So we have to take all of those things into consideration when we are funding community organizations. So those would be my points made. Fund everyone. Let's restructure the City Enrichment Fund. And maybe I'll give some free advice. Maybe the community services funding envelope should be turned into a community safety and well-being fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey. Committee members, any questions or comments for a delegate? Seeing none, thank you so much for the feedback as well as for your delegation points today. Could I get a mover and seconder to receive the delegation? Moved by Councillor Tattison, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Jackson, thank you. And it is before committee for receipt. Thank you. And next is 6.7, Jessica Benella Dempsey, who is here from the Sexual Assault Center of Hamilton area, respecting 9.1, the City Enrichment Fund. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
Whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Grant Subcommittee, staff, and others present today. My name is Jessica Bonilla Damte. I come before you as the Director of the Sexual Assault Centre of Hamilton Area, SASHA, and an executive member of the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centres. I am here 12 days after Sexual Violence Awareness and Prevention Month to urge this committee to properly invest in your local sexual assault centre, your only sexual assault centre, a top-scoring applicant by granting us our original City Enrichment Fund requests. The work that we do is to prevent, respond to, and end sexual violence in our communities. After my delegation to the General Issues Committee on November 11, 2022, I received various phone calls and emails from city staff and invitations from city councillors to meet and talk about SASHA, including funding from the City of Hamilton. I heard that many at the City Hall believe in the work that SASHA does and know that it is a vital service for Hamilton and for survivors. Throughout this, I was encouraged to increase the amounts I requested through the City Enrichment Fund so that SASHA would receive increased funding from the City of Hamilton. I was told that Council could only approve what Council knew of. So, while still adhering to the City Enrichment Fund's 30% maximum funding guideline, I submitted my applications as a long-time community service that has been receiving annual grants from the City Enrichment Fund to allow for planning and delivery of the services to support survivors for 48 years in this city, and that requires higher levels of city financial support to be successful each year. I submitted my application, hopeful and encouraged by these conversations. Unfortunately, the funding rationale under which we applied for funds changed after applications were submitted. Organizations did not have an opportunity to change their applications to meet the new rationale. Had the new rationale been known at the time of application, this would have allowed organizations and community groups to adjust their applications accordingly. As mentioned, SASHA is and always has been a top-scoring organization. We score A's on all of our applications. We work very hard on our applications and ensure they meet all of the requirements outlined. How does SASHA enrich the city? What are SASHA's benefits and contributions to Hamilton? SASHA's programs increase community capacity to address sexual violence and help create a community where survivors are supported, believed, and receive further resources within the community. We are working towards a community that is supportive and safe for all citizens in Hamilton. 1 in 3 women, 1 in 6 men, 1 in 2 trans and non-binary community members will experience sexual assault. Research shows that over 90% of survivors never report to police. Adult and childhood sexual violence have been identified as serious public health concerns. Their multifaceted, long-lasting impacts on survivors' lives include a range of physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and health concerns. Survivors may experience physical injuries, depression, sleep disturbances, trauma, anxiety, flashbacks, addictions, ongoing suicidal ideation, eating disorders, and even death. Research shows that the impact of sexual violence has a ripple effect on the survivor's children, family, and broader community. Sexual violence can impede an individual's capacity to fully participate as a member of a community. To support survivors is to support their family, to support their community, and beyond. Hamilton needs a local service. Service provision, outreach, and promotion are tailored to the needs of the local population in Hamilton. Survivors can feel more connected to a local service and can dare to make the difficult first call. Accompaniments and system navigation advocacy are inherently local, requiring contacts. A Hamilton-based organization can monitor the quality of local services, build relationships, and help them better respond to survivors' needs and promote better coordinated services. Instead of receiving funding increases, we received a decrease compared to last year for our counseling and advocacy program. Our crisis support program had no increase. Our diverse communities outreach program received an increase of $49. Our abuse prevention program also received an increase, but not the full amount requested. The Survivors First flag was flown at City Hall for the 3rd time in recent history this past month, Sexual Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. This flag says it takes a community to end sexual violence, and having it hung at City Hall shows symbolic steps of community support. So, as you go through the City Enrichment Fund's appeals process, I urge you, again, to move from symbolism to action and grant SASHA the full amounts of our original applications so that we may continue to provide critical supports for survivors throughout the whole City of Hamilton. As always, I welcome the opportunity to meet with you individually or as the groups talk about SASHA. And finally, we know that there are survivors in this room. So to them, know that we believe you at SASHA. We care about you and you're not alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Council member, committee members? Yep, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you very much, Jessica Bonilla Damte, for the outstanding, compassionate work you do in our community. To be clear, you're referring to in our report here your crisis support program and the VAN program that you need full funding on, that you've appealed through you, Chair Nan?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm actually changing my appeal. The appeals process was not adequately informed for appellants, and I didn't consider it appropriate to appeal for full funding. And now, after seeing the appeals process and seeing that there are funds available, I do request full funding for all 4 applications that I submitted. Our application for the crisis support program is appealing the full funding. Our application for the, for the counseling and advocacy program isn't asking for the full funding, but I do, if it's possible to change my appeal, I would like to, for all the reasons already mentioned in my delegation.
Councillor Jackson?
Okay, so Jessica, you've given me a mouthful there now, so I just want to be crystal clear. So what we have in front of us here is the Sexual Assault Center, item number 41, crisis support. Requested was $20,000. Previously approved 15,900. You're asking, you've appealed for the additional 5,900, is that correct?
Sorry, Councillor, if I can just clarify.
please help me.
Item 41
Yes.
is requested appeal is $20,000. The approved amount was $15,000. And then the appeal amount is $5,000.
5,000, my
So
apologies,
that
thank
is
you.
requesting the 25% in order to bring that program up to full 100% original request.
Through the chair, that's correct.
And then to you, Councillor, just so we're on the same page, 42 is regarding the counseling and advocacy program. And that's the original amount requested by appeal was 23,000. Previously approved was 18,750. And the appeal amount is 4,250, which would be 18%. And then those are the only 2 that are before committee right now.
Through the chair, that's correct. So through the appeals process, those are the only 2 that I've appealed. For information's sake, for counseling and advocacy program, the original request was for $25,000.
Through the chair, if I may.
Please.
I think we do need some clarity,
Yes,
so we'll
please.
just break the process a little bit and get some.
Chair, help me a
Thank
lot,
you.
but then Jessica, you just threw us a curveball, please. Director Stahl?
So through the chair, Sasha was an applicant for 4 applications through the community services stream. Through Jessica's delegation, she specified that they had identified 2 appeals through the appeal process. However, the 4 applications all scored an A, and they were recommended for funding for 75% of their original ask in the original report. They are reference numbers CSB5, CSB6, CSB7, and CSB8. So I just want to make sure I interpret this correctly as well. Through this process, Jessica's realizing that the appeal process, there's available funds, and she would like to appeal the 4 for their 100% ask, which would have Sasha funded at 100% of their request for those 4 applications. The amount requested in those areas was $26,000, $20,000, $25,000, and $16,000, and respectively, the recommended funding was $19,500, $15,000, $18,750, and $12,000. So we can do those calculations here. Staff have access to those applications as to what that would look like to add them to the existing appeals process.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
I'm glad I asked my question. Okay, so what we have before us, to be crystal clear, in the documents that Director Stahl you provided is CSB6, the Crisis Support Program, and CSB7, the Counseling Advocacy Program. 20,000 and 23,000 is what is requested on the total amounts. Got it. Now, you said there was a CSB5. I just want to write this down. CSB5 That was 26,000 in total requested. Jessica?
Through the chair, if you would like, I can give you this document with the information and the highlighted
I
items.
probably have that in my big document from a month ago,
All right.
but I'm just going by the recent correspondence we got from staff. But thank you, Jessica. Director Stahl, CSB 5 and CSB 8 is what I'm looking for, please.
Correct. So CSB 5, the amount requested was 26,000.
Okay.
The recommended funding was 19,500. CSB 8, the amount requested was 16,000 and the recommended funding was 12,000. So the difference in those amounts, just for the grants subcommittee.
Is he coming back?
I believe is 10,500, but we're just going to double check our math here.
Okay, I'm not going to hold this up while staff can do that. I know we're struggling as well for quorum, Chair Nan. I apologize. I suppose then if we want to, based on the executive director's request, that we would need to add then those two additionals and we'll figure out the final total amount if we move forward this bundle.
I have made note.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's why she's the chair. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your delegation,
Thank you.
Jessica. So moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Francis to receive the delegation. Thank you, committee members. So we have made our way through the delegations, and thank you all for coming and delegating. We are going to move over to our staff in order to receive our report in terms of the City Enrichment Fund appeals process update. And then it is my intention as chair to move a motion to address the appeals that we've heard not only today, but that have come forward, but that's going to come after the presentation with and the discussion with staff on the report, just so you all are clear. We also are very much at bare minimum quorum, and so we can proceed with staff's presentation, and I have confidence that in 2 minutes' time, we'll be fine in terms of quorum. Okay, so that doesn't mean that you have 2 minutes to present. It means that the other councillor members that need to leave, there's going to be a switch out and we'll be able to proceed with the agenda and get our work done for subcommittee. Over to you. Thank you.
So I will be as brief as possible to provide context on the appeals list that is attached as an appendix to this information report. Good afternoon, members of the Grants Subcommittee, community organizations, our delegates, and the viewing public. My name is Morgan Stahl, and I'm the Director of Government Relations and Community Engagement for the City of Hamilton. I'm joined this afternoon in person by city staff Mimi John, Carmen Bian, and Andrea Carvello. We're also joined by Monique Garwood, our colleague on the line. I would be remiss if I did not mention that we are an all-female grants team. My remarks will be outlining the appeals process and resulting information as outlined in the information report for Council's consideration today. At the May 24th, 2023 Council meeting, Council approved a one-time appeal process for all applicants of the 2023 City Enrichment Fund. The appeals webpage was launched immediately following the Council meeting on Wednesday, May 24th, 2023. On May 25th, 2023, applicants were initially notified of the appeal process with the approved recommendations via an email through the online platform SurveyMonkey Apply. Staff received individual inquiries and council communication was sent out during this time for a quick turnaround of the appeals process. With continuous improvement processes being implemented in the corporation, DocuSign was implemented in the fund this year. Unlike paper, DocuSign or e-signature contracts are received instantly once sent. We received positive feedback regarding this continuous improvement measure. DocuSign will significantly contribute to better tracking, applicant response rate, and management on the back end. At this time, we have received 110 completed and submitted funding agreements to date. For those who wish to not use DocuSign, agreements were submitted via email manually as in previous years. As a reminder, during the 2023 budget process, council approved $6,575,410 with an 8% increase to the City Enrichment Fund. The total value of eligible funding requests totaled nearly $9 million. Council approved funding to all 313 eligible applicants. This is a 15 to 20% increase than in previous years through consistent and transparent funding rationale, and marks the first time in the City Enrichment Fund history that all eligible applicants were recommended for funding. For context, in previous years, eligible applicants, although scoring well, ran out of funds in program streams and envelopes. So even if an organization scored an A and a B in previous years, funding had run out prior to getting to those groups. The simplified rationale recommended 75% of an applicant request for organizations who scored 80 to 100 and 61% for scores between 60 and 79, and funding not being recommended for a score below 60. At that same meeting, staff were directed to report back on an appeal process with an overview of all submitted applicant appeals in the form of an information report upon the conclusion of the appeals process deadline of June 2nd at 5 p.m. An appeal process was open to A, B, and C categories, and any organization adversely impacted or hindered or with hindered operational capacity due to the approved CEF funding amount. Applicants needed to clearly articulate the adverse impacts hindering operational capacity with the original recommended amount. Categories deemed NA were unique, as those applicant programs were absorbed by different organizations due to extenuating circumstances where the original organization either folded, closed, or programs were transferred. As per Council's request, the appeal process was intentionally developed to ensure a simplistic and user-friendly experience. An online fillable form was developed to provide all applicants for ease of access. According to the form estimator, the appeal process took approximately 5 to 6 minutes to complete. The appeals form asked the following questions. Are you formally appealing the recommended grant amount? Is the City of Hamilton your sole or primary grant source? The reference number, organization name, program and event name. It asked to please specify the dollar value needed to fulfill your existing 2023 City Enrichment Fund program, inclusive of the recommended amount. And the last question was to briefly explain the significant and/or financial hardship affecting the programming, i.e. not able to carry out the programming with current recommended grant amount. By June 2nd, 2023 at 5 p.m., 73 appeals had been received, totaling $673,742 worth of applicant appeals amount through the application intake process. Of those appeals, 48 applicants requested 100% of their initial request. That is 48 out of 73, equaling 65% of all appeals. We also have the breakdown, should grant subcommittee members be interested, in the totals based on the program areas. Members of the committee will notice staff have kept in line with the way City Enrichment Fund recommendations are usually arranged in the appendix. So they are not ranked in any order, but they are allocated based on program area. Again, not demarcated based on merit. The resulting appeal information received is outlined in Appendix A to Report GRA 23003A as attached. The appeals for your consideration before you today would likely need to be funded through the City Enrichment Fund Reserve, as we have fully exhausted the 2023 City Enrichment Fund operating budget for this year. The current reserve balance is $887,050. I did want to highlight that this has been communicated as a one-time appeal process, as the reserve is not a sustainable funding source moving forward. Happy to answer any questions of the committee.
Thank you, Director Stahl, for that detailed overview and still succinct. Committee members, we are open for discussion. Councillor Jackson, and then I'm adding myself to the speakers list afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Nan. And Director Stahl, once again, I'll say that you and your team did exemplary given the untenable position that you're in. One thing I agreed with Kojo Dempsey is that increased funding, we did give an extra $500,000 to get it up to about 6.6, but there's still a total of 9 million that was requested from the community. So we'll see what we can do for 24. Through you, Chair Nan, Director Stahl, just to get crystal clear, you've heard some of the traditional groups as well from various backgrounds in our community who scored very well, scored their A's. That's 75%. That was an internal decision to try to meet the equitable distribution, especially to new organizations that received nothing in the past. Just to get that clarified for the record. Through you, Chair Nan, please to you, Director Stahl.
Through the chair to Councillor Jackson, staff, as per the City Enrichment Fund guidelines, staff are to bring forward recommendations that utilize the full amount of the City Enrichment Fund budget. In an effort to fund all of the organizations that scored a passing grade, that was the only funding rationale that would have all organizations who scored a passing grade funded to some degree. Any other funding rationale that staff could recommend or put forward would have had organizations who scored a passing grade unfortunately not funded at all. We would have run out of funds in envelopes. So although the funding rationale is a recommendation from staff, there are also City Enrichment Fund guidelines that we have to abide by when producing that rationale.
Fair enough. And what I was getting at, Director Stahl, no condemnation whatsoever. What I was getting at was the fact several groups have asked me, Tom, why we scored well? Why would you just give us 75? I said, well, hold it. We set the guidelines as a committee, Chair Nan, but the 75% was something that internally was decided to help the equitable distribution. Is that correct? Because I don't remember deciding myself as a committee member on 75% through you, Chair Nan.
Through the chair, the committee did not decide on that percentage. That percentage was a staff-initiated recommendation in order to ensure that all organizations who scored a passing grade were funded to some extent.
Fair enough. A couple of more quick questions, Director Stahl. There's 887 in reserve, but I remember last meeting, I think I heard an additional 500,000 was committed. Can somebody just, through you, Chair Nan, explain that, either yourself or if business facilitator Garwood's on the phone? Because I think we need to understand the 500,000 I thought I heard that's been previously committed.
Perhaps I'll start, and if Monique Garwood has anything to add, she can jump in. There was 500,000 previously committed for the one-time enhancement grant. That has already been rolled out. That was approved by the grant subcommittee. There are folks that were applicants in the room. So that has been rolled out to community, and that 500,000 is not part of the remaining 887 uncommitted balance.
Perfect. Thanks for clarifying that. So we truly have 887 at our disposal today. And last question, my comment about, I remember for many years, City Enrichment Fund had a pot of money, a separate fund for policing, for street closures, helped offset costs for those expenditures for some groups. Do you still have that kind of fund available? Or is that something that, if you will, Director Stahl, expired and hasn't been part and parcel of the amount that we distribute? Through you, Chair Nan, that's my last question.
Thank you.
Through the chair, perhaps that that is prior to my time with the City Enrichment Fund, but I'm looking to Andrea and Carmen because I believe in the previous iteration under CPP, before the transition happened to CEF, that was a mechanism that was utilized by
That's what's jarring my memory then. I recall that. Could maybe one of the directors, either Bian or Carvello, just confirm that, please?
Councillor Jackson, it's before my time, so that's one term back.
Okay, fair enough. Yep.
Through the chair, I believe it was through the ERCS program. in partnership with CPP that would fund community groups through several different mechanisms. And IRCS, as I believe, it was actually before my time as well, was dedicated to policing street closure
There you are.
expenses.
Okay.
When the CPP was folded into CEF, the IRCS program was closed with the thought that all
There
of
we
those
are.
costs would come through in the one application to CEF.
Fair enough. And by the way, all of you in this room, none of you, but I was there, so I'll take full ownership of my question, and I just wanted to reaffirm that information. Maybe, Chair Nan, just a thought, possibly going back down the road, something to reopen and reconsider to help offset the amounts that some groups need. Thanks, Chair Nan.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson, and keep your microphone on.
Okay.
And through you, just wanted to clarify, through staff, understanding the situation with those organizations that appealed that are on our chart with the NA, but then there is one that is the DNQ. And I just wanted to get clarity from staff on that appeal.
Director Stahl?
Item 65, please.
Item 64 is showing an NA, and item 65 is showing a DNQ.
I'm good with 64 through you. It's
Oh, my apologies.
65
My
that I need
apologies.
clarity on.
65 only.
Yes.
Through the chair, we've identified it. We're just deliberating here if we could have 30 seconds. I will defer to, we're calling her Director Bian, but she is Policy Analyst Bian today.
Fair enough. Policy Analyst, Bian?
Oh, sorry, have one of us.
Oh.
So through the chair to the committee, thank you for the promotion. I'll expect the compensation that goes with that shortly. But I just wanted to sort of respond to the question around the 2 NAs. So my understanding is that originally both of those applications were submitted by other applicants. Okay, so we had a representative here from, Chelsea was talking about E-Fry had submitted for STARS. STARS, unfortunately, is a loss to our community, is no longer active. And YWCA has stepped up and requested to basically have those funds and that request and the whole model basically go from the STAR application right over to YWCA. Now, in fairness to the other applicant, it's not clearly listed on here, but Catholic Family Services did have a counseling grant with CEF. And since February, they have been asking if they would be allowed to do the same thing, to be able, in order to provide continuity of service, what they did is they wanted to transfer their request and the program lock, stock, and barrel right over to another organization. Unfortunately, it wasn't until April where they could identify that organization would be Banyan Community Services. We already support Banyan through our groceries program, so they're a known applicant to us. But I think, based on the rules of, the appeals, that's why the appears in NA. And that is why the financial burden piece, that checkmark box, is not there. But if required, I could confirm whether or not that box should be checked or not, because I've seen the information. But I think they're asking for the same thing. They're basically taking a program that had a previous applicant as the legal submitter. They're not changing the dollar amount. They're not changing the program. They just would like to be the new owner of the program. So that's those two. Now, in the case of Soho, they were originally does not qualify because, unfortunately, they are unable to have other funding sources than the City Enrichment Fund. So they don't have any other funding sources except for us. I was able to confirm that in consultation with them. But they submitted an appeal because they wanted to make it clear that without that funding, they would be unable to deliver this important writing program that is therapeutic for people who have experienced violence.
Councillor?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So for the Soho group, the item 65, they have appealed just through you. So staff are confident that we have what we need in order to, if committee wished today to move the entire package of appellants forward for funding, that you have what you need in order for them to be recipients of the funding and also for them to have met the requirements for reporting and all of those kinds of items.
Through the chair to the committee, yes, they are a very small group. It's a very important program. They do not have other funding sources, so I do want to make sure you're aware that it would be a circumstance where we would be 100% funding that program. I have confidence that they will have opportunity to perhaps find some other funding sources at another time. But given the challenges these days of fundraising, they just were not able to find any other funding sources to date.
Thank you, and through you, Councillor Jackson, the clarification there of the 100% is key because we have a policy that generally the guidance is, if I could get clarity on that language, thank you.
Coordinator John?
Yes, through you, Chair. We do have in our guidelines that we generally do not fund in entirety. We provide funding up to 30% of an overall program's budget, and generally that's not solely the City Enrichment Fund. It comes from other funding sources as well.
Thank you. Those are my questions, Councillor.
Chair, back to you.
Thank you. So any other discussion? Thank you, Councillor Tattison.
Different button. Just wanted to highlight that the Binbrook Santa Claus Parade was of the understanding that their request was going to be included in a motion that I think is not going to come forward now, based on what Councillor Jackson has just shared with me, because we're going to pass them all at once. So they did not go through the appeal process because they figured they were in this motion that we were going to vote on separately. So it's an amount, I'm just requesting that an additional top-up of $1,250 be approved in the form of a grant for the 2023 Binbrook Santa Claus Parade, in lieu that the process of what we were doing has changed in the last 30 minutes.
Okay, so just so I can clarify, back to you, Councillor Tattison, that the Binbrook Santa Claus Parade chose not to appeal, even though the appeal process was open until June 2nd for all? Which is the public process for appealing, so as a committee?
This is correct.
Okay.
But they were under the impression that they were included in this motion that was going to be forwarded by Councillor Jackson with all the Santa Claus parades.
Got it, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, any other questions on the report? Discussions on the report? Seeing none, then we will move, we need a mover and seconder to receive it. Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Tattison. Please vote to receive the report. Elsie McCray, we've received the report now. Correct. I would like to move a motion regarding the report. Okay. And I believe you have the language with some language. You have some words that we can maybe work with. And I do want to just preface, I guess I should pass the chair over to you, Councillor Jackson.
Go ahead, Councillor.
To you, that I wanted to first off just say thank you to staff for all your work for this year in the recommendations, the considerations, everything you brought forward to Grants Committee in a year of transition, while also championing for additional funding for organizations that deserve to be funded that historically have been left out, and trying to come up with a solution that enabled us as a committee to work with moving forward. To the applicant organization pool across the city, I want to say thank you for bearing the brunt of a year of transition. Fundamentally, our goal as an organization, as a city, is to make sure that each organization is able to and empowered to, through support, through this fund, to support our community at large, whether it is through arts, whether it's through culture, whether it's through events, whether it's through vital community services that so many organizations have been bearing the brunt of, especially through the pandemic and this iteration where recovery is not a lived experience for everyone. So with that said, I am going to be moving with one of my subcommittee members seconding the following recommendations: that the appeal requests from applicants in all categories in the amount of $673,742 be approved and funded from the City Enrichment Reserve. That B, the Sexual Assault Center funding request for CSB 5 for $26,000, CSB 7 for $25,000, and CSB 8 for $16,000 be topped up to the full amount by further funding $5,500 to CSB 5, $2,000 to CSB 7, and $4,000 to CSB 8 to be also funded through the City Enrichment Reserve account, and that $1,250 be allocated to the Binbrook Santa Claus Parade, also to be funded through the City Enrichment Reserve account.
And that's a top-up on BIM, top-up.
Correct.
Yeah.
The same language
Yes.
as in B would be considered 4C.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying, Councillor Jackson. So it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Jackson. And thank you again to staff for supporting the work and the appealing process.
Through the chair, the language that was added to the one-time enhancement grant about the 30% and organizations not being adversely impacted or having funds clawed back, just through the experience of the one organization who's receiving 100% of their request, and perhaps some others where that may impact them in the appeals process, I would just ask that we add that same language that we added through the one-time enhancement grant, where any organization wouldn't be adversely impacted if they surpass that 30% threshold. Because the Santa Claus parades, not to single them out, but they are also in that category where the amount is, I hope I'm not, I want to not ensure that they're implicated in this, because the amount is more than 30% of their overall budget, so I want to ensure that they're not impacted by that.
Just like a couple of the other ones, right?
Yeah.
That we discussed. The why, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I can send the language to Elsie McCrae.
I appreciate the recommendation from staff to make sure that that language is there. Through you, Acting Chair?
Yes, absolutely. But Director Stahl, that would be for any and all groups that exceed, correct? You'll put that in a general comment. Thank you. Correct. Yep. Sorry, Councillor Nan, you still have the floor. Right.
That any funds allocated and distributed through the City Enrichment Fund one-time appeal process be exempt on a one-time basis and not counted towards any funding formula that restricts regular funding up to 30% formula. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, so all of those items, and then the last one for consideration would be, given some of the points that came forward through delegations today, the desire in the community for a consultation process for staff to receive some input on how we might be able to improve the equitable funding model used by the fund moving forward in a manner that is transparent, clear in terms of timing of application, information on how applications are scored, clarity around how funding will be allocated, and how specifically funding would be allocated if funding requests are exceeding CEF budget. So I know that there was a number of suggestions that came forward in delegation today. I don't want to limit staff in the input that you're going to receive. So I would also like to add language to the motion that directs staff to consult with community organizations to receive input into developing a further equitable funding formula for the City Enrichment Fund. Is that clear? Yeah, okay. That would be my last addition to the motion, Councillor Jackson, and then
So Angela, what would that be, an E part? Is that an E?
Right now, yeah.
Okay,
And it's not finished, and it's spelled mistake.
so we have that's good, a 5-part motion. Councillor Nan from yourself, seconded by myself.
Through the chair.
Yes,
if I
Director?
may, is the expectation that that consultation with community organizations occur prior to the next intake?
I think it would be important to inform our next cycle of the CEF. Yeah. So whether it's prior to the intake, as part of the intake, I'm open.
Secretary of Consult Communication Fund process,
Yes.
and report back to this committee. In advance of the,
We would have to occur in August because our next intake is September 1st.
So through
Councillor?
you, Chair, I am open to staff engaging in this work and having it inform the 2024 process. And in your regular 2024 process reporting, that the subcommittee receive information of how you have updated the equitable funding process, having taken the feedback in from 2023. So I wouldn't require a report back on this item separately. I'm okay for it to be integrated into the 2024 rollout. That's fine.
and report back during 2024 with how it was implemented. I don't know if that's saying the right thing.
Report back in the 2024 CEF process.
Councillor Nan, as your acting chair, can I just ask to
Yes.
you, as we heard from SPCA and others, social planning and others, Research Council, SPRC, and others, they said that midstream, there seemed to have been the change that they didn't expect, even scoring A. Is that what, I just want to be clear, is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
And staff understand that? Director Stahl, please?
Through the chair, I understand that. I think we're going to have a conversation with finance about how that can be communicated to applicants, because the unfortunate thing is that the applications received between September 1st and November 1st inform the funding rationale. So 336 applications were received, adjudicated, gone through that process, to which then informed the funding rationale. The challenge is if 224 applications scored an A, everyone could have got 100%, right? Everyone could have got 110%. But that's where the disconnect is, I think, from the intake period to when the actual funding rationale comes forward. So we'll have to have some internal conversations about how that communication can occur and how that consultation can then inform decision-making. Because, yeah.
Fair. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to request through you,
Yes, Counselor.
Chair, or Acting Chair, that we just end the sentence at process, the first process, equitable city enrichment process, and report back to the grant subcommittee. Because we're looking for and aiming as a subcommittee, a full-scale, improved process, and we understand that that is going to be iterative in its flow, and as we continue to receive feedback, we were not going to be perfect in the first go, we're not going to be perfect in the second go. I believe we're going to have to continuously improve in the process, so I'm okay with leaving it with an end, Elsie McCray, so that staff be directed to consult with community organizations in order to develop a further equitable city enrichment fund process.
Make a process twice in advance of the 2024 CEF.
It might not be in advance of this 2024 CEF.
Oh, okay.
Right, so just process and report back. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm satisfied with that, Chair.
Satisfied with
Yep.
that?
Okay. You gonna stop sharing?
Did we want to put 2024 in there? No, not at this time. Okay, just Director Stahl, it's understood for you and your team. Good. Are we clear then on that 5-part motion, moved by Councillor Nance, seconded by myself? Any further questions or comments? Staff, speak now or forever hold. No, we're good? Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed?
And that carries 3-0.
Chair back to Councillor Nan. Thank you.
Thank you. Look at that mighty work of a committee of 3 and a team of staff. On to other motions. So at this point, item 10.1 that was on the public agenda. Councillor Jackson, your motion.
Do I need to withdraw that then, Angela, for the record? I will do I need a second, or I can withdraw because it's my motion alone? I own it. Nobody else can even touch it. It's mine. Okay, then I move to withdraw it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then our final item on the agenda is adjournment. Moved by Councillor Tedison, seconded by Councillor Jackson. All those in favor? And just a friendly note to any of my planning committee colleagues, we are required in planning committee by 4 p.m.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to staff for juggling with us today and the wackiness of 2 committees.